The next piece that you see from me will be with the totally outrageous title, How Mexico Will Pay for the Wall and Be Happy to Do It, the US border adjustment tax and how it works. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been doing a number of public presentations, and I find a common element amongst many of the audiences. Many people report that they find in the morning they wake up in a parallel universe where President Trump is President of the United States. And they need somebody to explain to them what, in fact, President Donald J. Trump, billionaire, is talking about. Now, the same President Trump promised as part of his campaign that he would build a wall and Mexico would pay for it. Recently, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, has talked about the funding for building a wall, and President Trump has actually written a regulation commencing the planning for building the wall. When asked by the media about the funding for the wall, President Trump said, yes, the Mexicans will pay for the wall because they'll face a big 20% import tax. So what I'm attempting to do this morning is explain what, in fact, President Trump is talking about. When Trump campaigned to be president, he campaigned on a platform of reducing corporate taxes to 15%. At the same time, Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, in the research done through the committees of Congress, had constructed a similar but not identical program, which was marketed on the website betterway.com, in which he suggested ways that the Republican Party might be able to reduce the corporate tax rate to 20%. What Paul Ryan showed on the Better Way website was that even though the headline corporate tax rate in the US was 35%, when you actually looked at the raising of corporate taxes, there were a whole lot of what are called, in American political parlance, carve-outs. Areas where lobbyists had got tax deductions for their particular industry in return for political donations to this or that party. And Paul Ryan on the betterway.com website showed this as he said, a taxation system that looked like it was a piece of Swiss cheese. And what he said that he was going to do was take out all those exemptions, all of those corporate tax exemptions, and in doing so would be able to cut the corporate tax rate to 20%. Now, one of the corporate tax exemptions that he proposed to remove, rather surprisingly, and I don't think this would work in a very open economy like Australia, but one of the corporate tax deductions that he proposed to eliminate was the corporate tax deduction on imports into the United States. And this corporate tax, removing this corporate tax deduction on imports in the United States would be known as the border adjustment tax. Now, what does this, firstly, how big would this border adjustment tax be? Well, if you've got a corporate tax rate of 20%, then, and you take away a tax deduction of 20% for imports into a country from, so that country can no longer write off that 20%, what you're effectively doing is you're generating an import tax, an effective import tax, an effective revenue tariff of all imports into the United States of 20%. So that is what the border adjustment tax is. Now, why is that beneficial to US corporations to do that, and why is it beneficial to the US government to do that? Well, the first thing we note is that there is no tax deduction on imports into the United States, but there is a tax deduction on all expenses associated with exports from the United States. So therefore, what this does is it increases the price of imports, but subsidizes American exports. So by doing so, it rebalances trade towards domestic production in the United States. But there's something more important that it does from an international taxation point of view. And that is it changes the structure, the incentive structure for transfer pricing towards production in the United States. One of the major problems that the US has in its tax system is it has experienced US corporations moving to lower corporate tax entities, then centering much of their business in those lower tax entities, and then exporting the product back into the United States. Now, take the example of a corporation that might locate itself in a small island west of the United Kingdom, which has a corporate tax rate of 15%. That the name of that Ireland will be entirely out of this discussion to make sure it's hypothetical. Now, a large technology corporation might locate there, and it might say that it manufactures a huge amount of product there, which it exports to the United States. Under the current arrangement, when it exports, if it exports to the United States, it's in its interest to increase the price or maximize the price of that export to the United States, because that import into the United States is tax deductible for its US corporation. And the higher the price that it exports from that island, to the United States, the higher amount of income that it can keep in Ireland, which has a very low tax rate and much lower than the United States. So what you've got at the moment is a set of incentives within transfer pricing for corporations to capture value outside of the United States in tax havens and then export that product to the United States. When you change the tax structure to in line with the border adjustment tax, what happens is it is in the interest of the corporation, the multinational corporation, to export the product into the United States at the lowest possible price to reduce to the minimum the border adjustment tax. In doing so, it's also moving income towards the United States away from the tax haven, so that that income can be captured within the US tax system. So one of the advantages, or there are two major advantages of the border adjustment tax. The first is that it moves production towards the United States generally, and the second is that it takes the incentive away for US corporations to apparently produce in tax havens and export to the United States. So in two ways, it generally reinforces keeping and moving domestic production back into the US production, back into the United States for production. Now, why wouldn't Mexico mind paying this border adjustment tax? Well, because China is going to be paying more border adjustment tax than Mexico is, and so is Germany going to be paying more border adjustment tax than Mexico is. And in fact, Mexico will just be taxed exactly like every other country. And why should it complain about that? So the border adjustment tax will contribute to reducing the corporate tax rate to, we think, an achievable target of 20%. And in the end, the Mexicans will not mind paying that tax.